Welcome back, everybody. This is the Decentralized Tech live stream. This is where we talk about all manner of decentralized technology, everything from layer ones and layer twos to decentralized finance to occasionally Web3 gaming. But my favorite topic, DePIN, decentralized physical infrastructure networks. Hopefully, if you've been watching my streams, DePIN is not a new idea for you because we have been talking to a lot of other DePIN founders. I am a DePIN founder myself. So for those who are maybe tuning in for the first time, my name is Jon Radoff. I am one of the founders and the CEO of a company called Beamable. And we noticed a huge problem in the game industry. It's a $200 billion industry that's spending tens of billions of dollars on infrastructure, and they're currently locked into these very expensive siloed technologies. We felt we could open that up and create community ownership around it. So that's what we're doing. We're launching our TGE a little bit later this year. Nodes are actually going on sale pretty soon for our alpha nodes. But enough about us for now. We'll talk more about what we do from a DePIN standpoint. One of the things I've been trying to do is just bring in the founders and teams behind other DePIN projects so we can get other perspectives. So, for example, last week we talked to Spexy, which is building a DePIN for drones, right? So it's not just compute networks, it's all manner of hardware that can be put online and solve a lot of really interesting problems, from drones to compute to AI to you name it. And today we're going to talk about GPS. So we all know what GPS is, right? Global Positioning System. But we're going to talk about some new problems that can be solved to make GPS even more accurate, as I understand it. But I'm going to let Daniel introduce it. Daniel, before we do the deep dive into like specifically what you're building, could we talk a little bit about your own background? Like what brought you to this point in time that you're building a DePIN project with GPS?
Sure. First of all, thank you very much for having me. It's a great honor to be on your show. So Daniel Ammann calling in from Zurich, Switzerland. I'm actually not so much a Web3 OG, but I'm a GPS OG. I've been in the GPS industry for close to 30 years now. And back then I did my first startup together with a few friends, where we looked at the hardware side of GPS. GPS back then was bulky pieces of equipment, and we built the world's smallest GPS receiver. Over the years, we've went into chips, semiconductors, and developed a market-leading position. And just to illustrate that, this is how a GPS receiver looks. So there's a bunch of chips on it, some passives. So the hardware side of things. And with that company, we've been designed into cars, into drones, into all sorts of interesting applications that need to know where they are. Now, GPS as such is a technology operated by the US government. There is also European counterparts, Chinese, Russian counterparts. So the overall systems that are called GNSS, so Global Navigation Satellite Systems, to talk about all of them, but we prefer to talk about GPS because everybody knows what GPS is. So the accuracy of GPS is limited to about 2 meters, and this has to do with the delays that the signals have as they travel through the atmosphere. Now, in urban environments, the position is less accurate, and that has to do with the signal bouncing off buildings, and multipath is there the limiting factor. But out in a field, for example, it's accurate to 2 meters. And that's what you can improve by having a network of the stations that receive those signals and observe those delays. And I can dive a bit deeper in a sec, but that's what I've been doing. My personal background, I'm an electronics engineer from a local technical university here in Zurich. I'm still a bit technical, also do some coding and have my soldering iron here on my desk. But I'm mostly more on the business side, on the strategy side of how we can change the GPS industry.
Awesome. So one of the things I love about DePIN is, to me, it's really the first sub-market within crypto where the customer of the project is really it's not targeted towards crypto native customer base. It's solving problems that already exist in the world. So for example, in our case, game companies that want to launch multiplayer online games, they need game servers. It's just a fact of that business. And today that's 99.9% still like what we call Web 2, traditional game development. So if you really want to access this market, you have to address Web 2 demand. It can't just be for Web 3 gamers. That's the same in a lot of the markets that I'm seeing for DePIN. I think that's actually what makes this scalable way ahead of a lot of these other sort of dream aspirational projects that have come back and forth within Web3 over the last few years. Could we, before we kind of get into the specifics of how you're approaching it through DePIN, can we talk a little bit more about the customer aspect of this? So you've described the problem, which is essentially a lack of accuracy. I think you just said 2 meters of precision on traditional GPS. Why do people need even finer precision than that? What are the use cases for that this unlocks for the rest of the world?
True. So in many applications, most applications, they're good enough with 2 meters. If you need to find your way through a city, or if you need to know where the trucks are, where your deliveries are, that's good enough. But there is a large class of applications existing, but also upcoming, that need more precision. Traditionally, things like land surveying, mapping, they need to have the position down to a fraction of an inch of that device out in the field, down sometimes even down to millimeter level accuracy in order to do the use cases that they have. Now, that's an established market, has been around for 20-something years for providing such data services which can improve the accuracy of GPS, but in a very traditional way. And I'll talk about that in a sec when we talk about the problem that we're actually solving. But on the use cases, largest market today that uses such data is agriculture. So in larger but also smaller farms, it's quite standard that you have a tractor that auto steers throughout the field. Once it's there, it controls things like fertilizing, weeding, seeding in a high precision mode, so that the farmer doesn't have to steer the tractor with that precision. That's quite established technology, but there's a new class of applications up and coming, which is mostly in the robotics and in the drone field. So anything on the ground, for example, line markings on streets or delivery or any such applications, they need to know with better precision where they are. Also drones, things like those light shows, so those drone operated fireworks. The drones need to be accurate down to centimeters, otherwise they couldn't have these swarm formations that they fly in order to produce those visuals that they do in the sky. So there's quite a number of use cases up and coming, all the way towards autonomous vehicles, vehicles that need to stay within the lane. And there the accuracy, it's not so much about the accuracy, that is one aspect, but it's more about the integrity. So you need to have a high level of redundancy of that information, trustworthiness on that information in order to have cars rely on it, and in the end, life depend on the precision of the device. That's some typical use cases. Yeah. There's plenty more, which are not so much about positioning, but more about Earth observation in the area of weather forecasting, plate tectonics, earthquake detection, that you can do with a similar network. But today's largest markets are mostly in agriculture and drones and robotics.
Agriculture, drones, not words we typically associate with Web3, but I think that's what's exciting about this, right? It's that these are real world problems, and it's physical. It's literally as physical as it gets. It's the positioning of objects in the real world. So that's pretty exciting to think of that as a Web3 application. Daniel, can we talk about your solution to this now? So you found this problem, the lack of precision. There's a big market for it for all these applications you just described. Your project or company is called onocoy. Am I getting the pronunciation right?
Yes,
perfect.
Absolutely.
Okay. So take us into onocoy and sort of the idea, the vision, and where you are in the project today.
Sure. So as I said, it's a technology as such. So measuring the delays from the satellites, that's not new. We didn't invent this. This has been established. And there is a large industry out there depending on market studies, somewhere between $20 billion and $200 billion with annual revenues that sell such correction services. There's also a hardware part that's another $150 billion of market, but there is an established industry. Now, if you look at what these people do, those 20, 30 companies, they operate private networks. So they roll out their own stations. They purchase them, they install them, they maintain them, and they have a high cost for such networks. If you want to provide service, high precision services in a certain area, you need to have stations every 15, every 20 miles. Because the correction data gets less correlated, or the farther you move out, the less value the data has. So it's both spatially but also temporarily variable data. So those delays as they happen in the atmosphere. So you need to have a fairly dense network, which means if you want to cover North America, for example, you need a few thousand stations in areas where you want to provide service. Same in Europe, in China. And so that's a lot of cost, because each station done in a traditional way costs somewhere between $10,000 to $20,000. That's the one thing. That there is also an OPEX consideration. To maintain those stations, you need to rent space somewhere on a radio tower or on a rooftop. You need to provide electricity, connectivity, and that's another $2,000 to $4,000 a year that you pay for stations. Now, those people, they compete in the marketplace amongst themselves, and they have no incentive really to share the data that they do, because they're competing. And so they also see some value in owning their own networks and controlling it. But that's where we provide a method, a way, an ecosystem, how people can make use of a utility layer of a network that anyone can build on top. So our primary demand side focus is on the existing industry. So unlike many other also DePIN projects, we are not just going against the existing industry. So we are not doing the same, but in a Web3 way. Actually, we're doing it quite differently. We are solving a problem for an existing Web2 industry by providing them a layer which is higher density, which is lower cost, and which is geographically omnipresent on the whole planet. And through that, essentially, we are providing the same data to anyone who wants to build on top, and with a DePIN approach. So talking a little bit about the supply side, like many, or actually probably all DePIN projects, we have a demand side, which is typically a Web2 market, and a Web3 style supply side. So people can purchase a piece of equipment, an antenna that looks like this, mount this on the rooftop, connect it to a small box, which then in turn connects to your home Wi-Fi or your home Ethernet, and provides the data to us. This box is, or this antenna is receive only. So all it does is receives the satellite signals from the existing constellations. And in return for that, we provide them our token. So they earn tokens on a per day, per availability basis. If there is an over population in a certain region, then the rewarding is going to be toned down, because we don't need to have too many stations. If we have 3 stations within 20, 30 miles, then people start sharing the rewards, because we'd like to roll it out as homogeneous as we can.
So there's a natural incentive to kind of buy into regions where nobody else has occupied yet.
Correct. I can do a quick demo
Absolutely.
to show the platform. Oscar, if you wouldn't mind bringing up my screen.
Yes, sir.
While you're doing that, crypto makes a good point here, which is like last week we talked to this drone project, and it's very, very interesting. I don't know if there truly is a direct integration there, but there's some interesting comparables in that. For them, similar to you, geographic distribution is really important, because ultimately they need to be able to map out the whole Earth with drone photography as a much more high resolution alternative to satellite-based photography. And their incentive mechanism is essentially like a hex grid of the Earth, where you have to be able to run missions in those areas to get paid. So I think good catch, Crypto, that I think that's one of the interesting things about DePIN. DePIN is attracting projects where widespread geographic distribution ends up being one of the facets of kind of the solution that you're trying to offer.
Indeed.
We're looking at a map.
Yes, and such use cases like aerial imagery, that also needs high precision, because you need to geolocate those photos that are taken down to centimeters. It doesn't necessarily have to be real time. That could also be done in a post-processing mode. So it needs to have a GPS inside, but then you need to process that data in order to determine the precise trajectory down to centimeters of where this image was taken at this very millisecond when it was taken. So yes, this is our platform. This is live. You see probably this number going up and down a little bit while I speak. That's the number of stations we have in the network. And each station provides data into the system 24/7 and is being rewarded. And if I zoom in into some regions, you see we don't use hexes. I'm quite allergic to hexes because it's making this arbitrary boundary somewhere on the map where there's actually no physical boundary. So we rather have floating transitions. For example, when we look at vicinity, we're looking at distances and have an algorithm there, how we then determine how many people are how far from each other, and then we determine the distribution of the rewards. So if I zoomed in, and sorry for zooming into Europe, but that's my home turf. So each point on this map is a station. The heat map shows where we can provide service. So in all the regions where it's green, GPS high precision can be used. Also in the US, so East and West Coast is fairly well covered. In between, it's quite spotty.
There's nobody there anyways.
But that's really interesting. In Europe, you've got, it looks almost completely saturated. I see some mountain range.
I mean, we can provide service already with one station in, say, 20 to 40 miles. But we'd like to have a threefold redundancy. So even if the service provisioning is there and we have running stations, we'd like to have some redundancy, because in DePIN, you never know when the miner turns off the device. So we need to have some level of So we are targeting a threefold redundancy. I can bring up another view on here. So here you see each green circle is a station, each gray circle is a station that was up and running in the last 7 days. And there is empty spots where we would have service, but we don't have the redundancy. We actually can show this here. So for people who want to contribute, there's this smog view. Where it's gray, there is already threefold or more than threefold redundancy achieved. And outside of that, it's empty. So anyone who puts up stations outside of that gets maximum rewards.
Zurich covered, but if I want to boot up a node in Lugano or something, it's greenfield still. I'm just saying Lugano because I was at a crypto conference a few weeks ago.
Yes, so if you go into Lugano, out there you see it makes perfect sense to set up a station there.
Nice.
Also in the US. So this is the views for the miners. You could also estimate rewards if you put a marker somewhere on the map. What you need is a piece of hardware. This antenna on the box. And unlike many Web3 DePIN projects, we don't do the hardware for several reasons. First and foremost, I've been doing hardware 22 years of my career, and hardware, as the name says, is hard. You have not only the manufacturing complexities, you have all sorts of logistics issues and export, and it's just pretty slow. But more importantly than this is there is an existing ecosystem which is established, which produces such hardware, which sells such hardware on a global scale. There's no point in a new project to reinvent the wheel and to then rebuild what is already out there. And the this allows us, if we are agnostic to the hardware and we're not earning on the actual mining hardware, we're only earning on selling the data, then we have a much broader scale. We can welcome the existing industry. And again, this goes back to this being solving a problem for the industry and not competing narrative. With that, we can piggyback on an existing established supply chain. That works nicely, and what it also enables is we can welcome stations which are already out there. So out of our stations that we have, about more than half of them are new installations that people have purchased equipment and connect to us. But the other half is existing networks where people operated the station already for their own purposes or because they're part of a bigger regional network or national network, and they like to provide service. And they also see an additional opportunity to monetize what they already do. So we can reuse existing hardware by basing it on open standards and being hardware agnostic. And the way this works, and I'm showing here Poland as a nice example, it's a nicely distributed network, and that comes mostly from an operator who has a regional service in Poland, and he sees that through our platform he can monetize his data further. So he provides us the data in parallel to his normal business, and that works beautifully. Mm-hmm. We're also one other example is we currently have from the demand side, from where we currently already sell into, we get indications where they like to see network growth. And a month ago in Malaysia, we didn't have any stations. So we are having a targeted rewarding mechanism where we can do spot rewards for a few months. And then people earn a multiple over the regular rewarding. So they start installing stations, and that has worked beautifully in Malaysia as an example. It was an empty space in our map, and now we have something like 60 stations throughout Malaysia.
Very interesting. So Daniel, I'm going to ask you a question, which I'll give you a moment to think about, because I'm also going to share some information with our community here. But Dan, the biggest question for DePIN projects, I think, or one of the biggest questions that come up, really comes down to like, why Web3, why a tokenized economy for this versus, okay, you could imagine a large enough company coming along and just creating some kind of stable coin based payment system that just rewards people for installing these antennas all over the world. And you could kind of imagine something similar, but why a tokenized economy for your approach to it, and or why does that help you scale faster, get to market faster, any of those things? While you're thinking about that answer, though, I just want to remind the community, we do this live, right? We got 800 of you already have tuned in to watch this program with Daniel from Onocoy. We're talking about decentralized tech, DePIN in particular, learning about how GPS can be improved. The precision of GPS can be improved by deploying hardware all over the world that corrects for the signals we're getting from the GPS satellite system. And there's all kinds of applications, from drones to autonomous vehicles to agriculture and everything in between. So a real world application. And that's what's super compelling, by the way, about DePIN. DePIN addresses this quote unquote Web2 demand. I want to kill the chief marketing officer of Web3, by the way. Web3. No sense, but forget this term Web2. It's just a real world business problem that lots of technology companies, lots of applications have. DePIN is uniquely suited to solve the customer side, but it does that by scaling up the supply side using a tokenized economy. So I hope a lot of you have questions about this. I'm already seeing some questions coming in. But yes, we do this live so that I'm not the only one, or Oscar's not the only two of us asking questions. We want to hear from you and your ideas and your questions for Daniel or me. But Daniel, let's start with that Web3 question. Why the token?
Sure. 4 main reasons. First of all, you can decentralize the investments needed for a vast network. everybody becomes a micro entrepreneur who participates, so they invest into purchasing the hardware. In our case, because we're hardware agnostic, people can even build themselves that piece of hardware. So you take a Raspberry Pi, you take a GNSS receiver, and you load a Docker image, and you're good to go. The investments that you'd have to do if you did it in a traditional way, or even with a stable coin, would be massive. Our goal is to have 100,000 stations, so that would be 100,000 times $2,000, $3,000 if you do it in a traditional way, because the hardware is more expensive. Now, in a DePIN mode, pricing for the hardware needs to be lower. In our case, as I said, with $200, you're there if you build it yourself. If you buy a ready-to-go box that costs somewhere $400 in that vicinity, you're good to go. And through that, we can also provide more redundancy. So I think reason one why Web3 is shared investments into a vast infrastructure.
It's essentially crowdsourcing the capital.
Essentially, yes, indeed. Secondly, for crowdsourcing, you need to have means to orchestrate what the community does. And in a Web3 way, with tokenomics, with the incentive schemes, we can steer it in a way. We cannot control it, which is what you traditionally would do. You would say, buy this piece of hardware and put it exactly there and not somewhere else. We cannot control it, but we can orchestrate it through the mechanisms that we've implemented on chain, through the rewarding mechanisms. And that's a very efficient way to orchestrate a large-scale rollout of a network. Reason three is more on the demand side. We are addressing a large existing market. So that primarily is the existing industry, people who already provide correction services and want to densify the network or geographically expand. But the service could already be used by an individual end device. So that means a lot of micro transactions that need to happen. And even for the existing industry, they may not want to sign up for a 1-year subscription where they need to prepay. And thanks to the possibilities that we have on chain, we can implement a pay-per-use business model. So if you're a customer in our system, you're paying by the second of data consumed. And that means many small microtransactions. You can buy 1 second worth of data, or you can buy a whole year of data times 1,000 streams. But that's a lot of transactions. And traditionally, a normal company, they would have an invoicing cycle. They would close a contract with you first and foremost, a paper contract, where you agree to terms and conditions, and where you have an SLA, and then you have a prepayment, and you commit to consuming the stream for a year. In our case, as long as you have data credits, and the data credits, because it's Web2, they're pegged to the dollar. So it's not a stable coin, but it's we need to have a one-to-one mapping of our service to dollars. And the people buy data credits and they use them as they go. And we can only orchestrate this because it's fully automated on chain. So that's reason number 3 why Web3. And the last one is governance. Because we want to be this horizontal layer, we need to make sure that our system cannot just be taken private by a big player. If a whole industry depends on a utility network, we need to ensure through means that we can implement also in our tokenomics and in the governance, that even if you would throw a lot of money into purchasing a majority of the tokens, you still couldn't control it. So in our governance system, we have things like square root based voting. So if there's improvement proposals on chain, this will not go linearly with the number of tokens that you hold, but with the square root, meaning that if you own a lot of tokens, you still have a large say in the project. But in order to be really controlling, it takes an endless amount of money to actually control it and to take it private, which gives also certainty to the existing industry that this is not something that can just be sold like a traditional startup or a company can change strategy as they will. A startup can be acquired and then strategy changes. And if the downstream value chain depends on such a service, then they're, depending on how strategy continues, they may be doomed. And with a on-chain governance and methods that are most efficiently implemented on-chain, like square root voting, we can ensure that. So that's 4 main reasons. There's plenty of other smaller parts, but again, it's CapEx, OpEx, it's governance, it's micropayments, and the way how we can orchestrate a massive rollout.
So what you're really describing there is not a company, right? It's a protocol, really. You're creating a new protocol using blockchain for value exchange, where these nodes that are antennas that receive the data contribute the data back, and then there's a customer side that can consume this data and presumably pay for it as well. But you're creating a protocol that really transcends any one company, and that's really interesting in this Web3 era that we're going to. Again, I actually hate the term Web3, so I want to somehow delete that from my vocabulary. But
Web trusts.
But in let's maybe think of it just as the decentralized era of technology. The protocol starts replacing what we might have thought of as institutions before. So institutions are governments, and even certain very large siloed companies who control things. A protocol takes that control away from the institution, brings it to communities that are decentralized, where the value exchange, the governance, the scale out and capital deployment, all of that happens in a crowdsourced, decentralized way.
Yes.
Is that similar to how you think of your approach?
I like to think of an ecosystem that we're building, or how we put ourselves into an existing industry and we solve a problem for them. The term protocol collides a little bit with the technical implementation of protocols. And when I talk protocol in GPS, nobody understands what I mean. So we're building an ecosystem where we are adding a utility layer, or protocol for that matter, to solve a problem that is there. And yes, I mean, that's exactly how we're thinking about it, an ecosystem, and providers, suppliers, and also customers down the value chain that consume it. And we are building the economics in that ecosystem, that there is a seamless interaction possible. And in consequence, we've also chosen to be a non-profit. So we are an association. That's the legal form. The association owns the IP, it owns the tokens, and it also owns the fiat. And that is a non-profit, meaning that any profit that we do from selling the data services, we need to be non-profit in the bottom line. So all we can do with that is we need to buy back the tokens and burn a portion of it. One portion goes back into circulation for rewarding of the miners, but a portion is being burned, meaning we are also by design a deflationary project. We are a commercial project. So yes, we endeavor to create value and to collect that value, but we are forced by organization and by the rules of the association to put that back into the ecosystem, and then everybody participates. So that's also the token as such is much more than just in the inner circle, a means between the miners and the demand side. It also aligns the interest of the team. So me, myself, I'm earning tokens as I work for this project, but also the investors. So investors, they participate in our project by signing up with a SAFT agreement where they invest. So they bring fiat, how we can finance the development of the project, the marketing, the business development that we do, and get tokens as the value appreciating part. And once we are listed, which happens fairly soon, they can start then they're being liquid, so they don't need to wait for an exit that you would have in a traditional setup. And again, we'd like to have the investors not needing a exit, because otherwise the strategy could change. If there were a transaction to a third party, then the strategy can change. And through being liquid, we ensure that we have a broad and stable customer or investors basis as well.
Daniel, you just mentioned that your TGE is coming up, so I'd love to talk a little bit more about that as well, because a lot of the people who tune into my live streams are also company founders and investors, and I think understanding the journey that people have been on and some of the choices being made are super interesting to people. So, can you share with us any details about the TGE, where you're doing it, like? That I think people would be curious about. My understanding is you're using decentralized platforms for the TGE as well.
Yes. So we're choosing a route to go to TGE by having it rather organic. So this is not a hyped up token where we're looking for exit liquidity for VCs. It's quite the opposite. The main reason why we do a TGE is that we like to have the people who have contributed data, the miners in our ecosystem, see what is the value of what they're doing. Some of them have been providing data for up to 2 years, and they're sitting on a bunch of points, and we like them to be able to start seeing what is the value of those points. We have then a method how they can convert those points into tokens. So it's not just an airdrop. There is a conversion rate which grows over time. And I think that's a novel model because we don't want to have a high fluctuation initially. So, and that is all with that mantra of being a industry project. Thanks to Web3, we can do what we want to do, but we are not looking for hyping up a token and then looking for exit liquidity. It's quite the opposite. So it's going to be a relatively low circulating supply launch. And in consequence, we also go for a decentralized exchange. We've built on Solana. Mm-hmm. So the points, the system of the token is called the Bono token. That's what people have earned so far. And once we have the TGE, it will convert into Ono. So, and that's happening fairly soon. Our plan is to do this before the end of the month. So if nothing major happens, if the macroeconomics are continuing and nothing stops us also technically to go out, it should still happen in July. Having said that, we need to finance the project further. So we will also continue fundraising. So far, we have a number of smaller scale VCs in the project, but mostly it's business angels that have supported the mission so far. And also we've been highly successful with non-dilutive grants. Just this week, we've been able to announce a new project where the European Space Agency, so the NASA of Europe, funds AI research on detecting fraud on GPS, because that's a general problem, fraud detection using GPS signals. And that's also, for example, in areas of war. That's a problem that has not been solved yet. And thanks to AI and also in our system, we have fraud detection in place. And with AI, we can bring this to the next level. Mm-hmm. Coming back to the TGE, so we continue financing the project also with VCs. Once we are listed, this will be in the form of OTC deals, where we have a small portion of in the pools we've reserved for that. If you look into our tokenomics, and that's all very transparent on our website. There's a white paper and there's documentation which explains the different pools. You will see that a large portion of the tokens have been reserved for the miners. So more than 40% of all the tokens are there for the long run. So we're targeting the project to be a 10 to 15 year initial tokens. We cannot create new tokens, but that also means the tokens will not become liquid very early on. So investors now, even if you looked at an FDV, that might be misleading because the tokens are going to be locked for a long time. If you look at the circulating supply, once we list it, this is a very reasonable numbers that we foresee. I cannot say anything on what's the price going to be at the exchange. I'm no financial advisor here. Yeah. So, sorry, that's a long explanation on the TGE. So TLDR is it's going to happen anytime in the next 2 weeks, likely next week, if all goes smooth. We also have a pre-sale up and running on a platform called Pink Sale. There is the possibility to sign up with a discount and relatively short vesting schedules. So there is going to be a 10% unlock at TGE, and then there's a 1% unlock of your investment per day. So after 90 days, all your tokens that you purchase in the pre-sale are liquid, and then you can do with it whatever you want. The TGE unlock is 10%.
And just to kind of go back to the ongoing financing strategy, it sounds like your approach to continue funding the company, rather than thinking of that as like an ICO per se, it's actually to build a treasury of your own token within the project and do OTC deals at a discount to investors who believe in the project and use that capital towards it. Am I interpreting correctly?
Yes, that's correct. So we're looking at OTC deals with then locking vesting terms. So they get a discount, but they're also locked in for a certain amount of time. And yes, so we need to finance the project further, but we also continue with non-dilutive grants, and all the tokens we don't need, we can then burn if we see in the treasury that there's a certain portion is reserved for grants that we can give to projects building on our platform, but the tokens which are in the pool, if we don't need them, then we burn them.
And when you launch on a DEX, how do you think about things like market making in the decentralized environment?
I must say, I'm not necessarily the deepest of Web3 person. I would, if another guy in the project would be on this call, I would hand this over to him. We have liquidity that we're providing. There will be market makers that may jump onto this, but as I said, we expect relatively low trading volumes at the beginning because there's not too many tokens that are floating.
I see.
It will become more and more, but that's also the reason why we're not initially going to a centralized exchange, because we are not attractive to them.
We have enough
that we have the volume that they like to see, and for projects like ours, that might be an expensive path to be listed and then eventually being delisted if it's not of interest anymore. So we rather want to build up volume. But an important point, what makes us confident, is that we do have revenues. So we are, unlike many, there's thousands of DePIN projects, and many of them, when they talk about revenues, the really fraudulent projects call token sales a revenue.
Oh, jeez.
If you sell tokens to an investor, that's revenue. That's definitely not what we do. There's projects which recognize revenue when they sell the hardware. So those projects, often they get somewhere between $10 to $100 on the back of the miners. So those people who invest into the infrastructure, they also pay the project, which then in turn they get rewarded. But first of all, they pay in dollars to the project. Because we are hardware agnostic, we don't have that, but we have revenues from the demand side.
Yes.
So starting on April, that I think sets us apart from many other DePIN projects. We have revenues where people buy our data. It's traditional industry. It's people who densify their networks, people who take on additional stations, put them into the processing that they already do with their private networks, and expand their service. And this is there's a good momentum, and we see this is attractive to the existing industry. I know that industry really well, and I probably know every company who uses such correction services from the correction services front, and also the business development team in my project. They're going after that market, and the resonance has been fantastic so far.
I think you pointed out something really important about DePIN specifically. It's important across crypto because there's so much bullshit in crypto, frankly, but we all know that. DePIN, while it's a great category, is not exempt from that either. So out of the, I don't know how many thousands of DePIN projects that exist at this point, it's important for everyone to realize like something on the order of 99 point something percent of those are entirely aspirational. Like there is no demand yet. They're just hoping that demand will appear if they fill out the supply. And then a pretty big portion of those, frankly, I'm not sure they know even how they're going to get the supply. They're just ideas that have that have an interesting narrative around them. So when we decided at Beamable to build a DePIN, it was only because we had already have like 100+ games live and operational on our network that have this urgent, very mission critical requirement to have game servers around the world to support their operations, and they're paying for it already. So on-chain revenue is got to be on the demand side, and I don't mean to. And I think you put the exclamation point on it. Demand isn't demand for the token. Demand is demand coming from customers who need the data, the services, the compute power, whatever it is that is actually the fundamental utility of the network. As long as people are paying for that, that's the revenue that these protocols really need to be talking about. I don't think we have a consistent way of talking about revenue lately, but I think for those of you in the audience that are tuning into this, you all need to become more savvy when it comes to like probing and asking questions about what revenue means for these DePIN projects, because oftentimes it's made up completely, by the way, or setting those aside, it's not really coming from the demand side. It's not coming from fundamental utility.
Absolutely. And in my mind, how I look at the DePIN landscape, there's like 4 classes of DePINs. The first one being the more infrastructure DePINs. So projects like IoTex and Peak, and they provide layer 1 specific for DePIN, or do anything on the layer 1 or ecosystem around it. But when it comes to application level DePINs, and I mean what you do at Beamable, but also what we do at onocoy, that's for me an application of DePIN. There's like 3 types of DePINs. There is those projects, as you pointed out, those projects which have a brilliant idea where you could do something decentralized, but they have no market. The market doesn't exist. So they're looking for a market to come into existence thanks to them being around. And brilliant ideas, and some of them will find a market, and most of them, I assume, will not. But that's not what we do. That's also not what you do at Beamable. And then there's 2 classes of projects where there is an existing industry, an existing market, which is ready to pay for such services. And then you can approach it in 2 ways. You can either go vertical, so you can do your own hardware, your proprietary ecosystem, your own end devices, and compete against an existing industry. And that often means, yes, hardware protocols, lock-in of the miner, but also lock-in on the customer. In the end, you compete, and in most cases, what you're doing in the industry is you're bringing pricing down. So it's most often the differentiation happens on the level of price. We don't do that. We are solving a problem in an existing industry, which is the availability and the redundancies of a global network that anyone can build on top. So we go horizontal and solve a problem there, meaning we strategically don't compete with the existing industry, because we believe in the long run, that's what's going to stay. It's that utility, like power coming out of your power outlet. There is just an infrastructure that is self-orchestrated, that is decentralized, that is just there, and that anyone can build on top. And we're really careful not to compete with them. So horizontal strategic positioning versus vertical DePINs, which have no market yet and hope for a market, and then the infrastructure. That's my mental model on how I look at the DePIN landscape. And you can map this onto compute and storage and sensors and communications networks and all those beautiful things that DePIN can do.
So Alexi is asking me to share some alpha about Beamable, basically. Hey, we're here to do all of the above. I will actually give you a couple of things, Alexi. But Daniel, one thing I'd like you to think about after I do that is Solana. So you're on Solana, Beamable is on Solana. Quite a few of the major DePIN projects, particularly the ones we were just talking about, the ones that actually have demand and revenue and stuff, seem to be converging on Solana. So I have my reasons why we chose Solana, which I'm happy to share. I'd love to hear why, from a tech and blockchain standpoint, you went with them. Before we get to that, we got to give my code out for the day. I teased that at the beginning of the program. So we've got a code that if you redeem it on Beamable's questing hub, you're going to get points towards our airdrop that's coming up soon, because we're doing a TGE a little bit later this year. And that code today is DePIN, DEPIN. It's what we've been talking about this whole program. So if you go to our Discord, you type /claim DePIN. We'll put that in the chat. We'll put it on the screen. I hope you know how to spell DePIN at this point if you've been watching my programs or this program at all. But in case you didn't quite hear it, that is the code, DEPIN, and you'll go and get your credit for the day towards the leaderboard. And thanks for tuning in and listening to us. The other alpha I'll just share is pay really close attention to Beamable Network, our account on X, because we are having our first alpha node sale coming up right at the beginning of August. Right, we're licensing a very tiny number of nodes. This isn't one of these things where you're going to hear that we raised $100 million or something. That's not our goal at all. It's actually to keep it very limited at this point and keep, frankly, the token emissions really good for the early community members. But also we're testing systems, we're testing the technology, we're testing the platforms. So definitely pay attention to that, because that's your opportunity to get involved in that. And we're whitelisting that soon. So you got to get whitelisted in advance to be able to participate in those sales. Just watch Beamable Network, keep watching my programs. You will learn how to do that. Be in the Discord. The Discord is a great place to be to learn that as well. Okay, let's go back to the blockchain question. So Solana. Daniel, why are you guys building on Solana?
All right. I must say I was blockchain ignorant for most of my life until I learned about the Helium project like 4 years ago. And Helium back then moved away from their own proprietary layer 1 onto Solana. So that was definitely something that we had where we thought, okay, that we need to look at closer. But then we had a team look into all the options that we had. Back then, when we made the choice like 3 years ago, Solana got a lot of hate. They had downtimes, and everybody was saying they're dead. But they were by far the fastest chain. They also had a really large developer community, and that were things that we considered really important. So we did a thorough analysis. The team has also done some write-ups on why we chose Solana versus other chains. I personally, it just needs to do its job. So that's my more traditional industry guy kind of view. If we would choose a layer 1 today, we'd probably would consider something more specific to DePIN that would have more primitives that we could be using in our network. But we are very happy with Solana, with how it works technically, with the support that we're getting from them. And because it's become a bit of a gravity center for many DePIN projects, there's also a good environment. There's some cross-fertilization amongst projects. Some of the tokenomics that we've implemented, other projects picked up, and we picked up other things from those projects. I think it's a good place to be.
Yeah, I'll share a little information for people just about Solana and its performance. I don't know if we can fix that bar coming through the screen. Yeah, there we go. So this is just a graph that I shared on my X feed. If anyone's interested in this, just go to the highlights on my X feed. You'll find an article about Wright's Law and blockchain. So one of the things I just observed about Solana is it has, first of all, for people that don't realize this, it has way more volume than almost all the layer 1s and layer 2s combined. It's extremely high volume. Why does it have that volume? Well, it comes down to early market lead. I think partly what Daniel said, which is the developer ecosystem is so strong that a lot of people have started building on it. But the transaction costs, the unit economics of Solana are quite a bit less than any of the other major L1s and L2s that are options for developers. So when you put all that together and you look at this log normal graph of cost versus volume, Solana is way up there in the upper right quadrant, which is very good. What does that mean? So the premise of Wright's law is that as unit costs come down, you kind of feed this flywheel where you're continuously unlocking new use cases for, in this case, blockchain, but it applies really to any technology industry. The thing that you can observe about Solana, and sometimes people laugh at the fact that all these meme coins have taken off on Solana. Well, there's a reason why the meme coins have taken off. It's because when you can do microtransactions at low cost, you unlock the ability to do what a lot of you might think is either silly or really, really fun, depending on your thoughts on meme coins. But it's only possible on a blockchain like Solana where the costs have gotten so low. So when you decrease the cost, it's an unlock on additional capabilities that network can provide. Now, it's not just the unlock for meme coins now. Now think about what that unlocks for everybody else. How about stablecoin transactions? Solana has a fairly significant percentage of the global stablecoin transactions that are going on. The biggest is Ethereum, but it tends to be very large amount of stablecoins being moved around, whereas on Solana, you can find that average transaction size is actually less. And it actually opens up, microtransactions like tipping small amounts and things like that actually becomes available once you can start doing stable coin transactions. But overall, you can think of stable coins as another mass market. Everybody needs stable coins basically, but a mass market application where the unlock gets much, much greater the lower those costs get. But I think DePIN is yet another one of these, because a lot of what goes on DePIN is small little transactions around data or compute. And if you can price those individual transactions in a way that actually lets you do it at a micro level, you actually can scale up the network of DePIN capabilities much better. So there are other blockchains that are also low cost. They haven't yet hit that volume or scale in the way that Solana does. I think Solana has such a market lead for this type of thing that they're in a super strong place. And also, we're already seeing the emergence of even layer 2s on Solana. So if the cost wasn't low enough already, you got things like Hypergrid coming along, and they'll drop the cost even more. So we're on Solana because of a lot of the reasons you said. One is that to the right, upper right quadrant that I show on that graph. Another is the ecosystem. There's so many DePIN projects there. I think there's also just a great community where we're able to share best practices and technologies and things, especially when we're not particularly competitive. So, Daniel, we're getting towards the end of our hour. I'd love to give you kind of the final word here, just to share anything anybody else needs to know about onocoy, how to get involved, where to find you online, and anything else you want to share with us about the project that and your ability to improve GPS accuracy through a DePIN project.
Sure. So, from a Web3 angle, the way you can participate is buy yourself such a station if you have a rooftop where you can install that, and it's not yet fully covered in our network. And the planet has lots of white space where you can do so. We are on Discord. A lot of action happens there. People talk about how to build the hardware, and they help each other. We're also very active on Telegram. We're active on X. You will find us there. Me personally, you don't find me on X really. I'm more the LinkedIn generation, both age-wise and also career-wise. So I'm active there. But I'm also on Telegram and reachable there, and on Discord, and so is the whole team. So thanks for having me. That was really awesome. Really, that hour that flew like nothing. It was really cool. Appreciate the opportunity. And if you want to participate in onocoy, yes, the pre-sale is currently running. It still runs until Sunday. So feel free to participate in that. If you look for Pink Sale Ono, there is a link, but the link you couldn't click on this video that's going here, but you'll find it there, or otherwise send me a message on Telegram, or the team will pick it up in our onocoy channel. And then TGE next week. Feel free to participate.
That's exciting times. Okay, your TGE coming next week. Beamable TGE date to be announced. Stay tuned, but it's later this year with the alpha node sale happening imminently. So stay tuned for all of the above. Thank you so much, Daniel, for participating in this conversation. It was a lot of fun. I could talk to DePIN founders all day long. It's always so interesting to hear, and everyone in this part of the crypto market is so like galaxy brained, because as if crypto wasn't complicated enough already just because of the cryptographic element and the economic element, but like now taking that and applying it to these really hard technical problems on a global scale. It's just super interesting and fun to hear how people are solving these things. So Daniel, thanks for taking part in this. Hope to have you on again, and good luck with that TGE next week.
Thank you. Likewise.
All right. Take care, everybody.